So, what does success really look like? I mean, is it a high-stakes career in the tech world, chasing those million-dollar deals? Or is it something else entirely? Today, we're going to dive into the incredible story of Ian Spandl, a man who literally traded Silicon Valley for a dog sanctuary, and in doing that, found a completely new way to define wealth. So you have these two completely different lives. On one side, you've got the tech executive in a Silicon Valley boardroom. On the other, the founder of a dog sanctuary, out in the kennels. So, chasing dollar signs versus finding what he calls spiritual income. The big question is, how does somebody make that journey from one to the other? It's a story that'll really make you rethink what a valuable income truly is.
Okay, so our story kicks off in a suburb of South Dublin. A 5-year-old Ian Spandl witnesses something that's going to shape the next several decades of his life. And it wasn't a world leader or some rock star. Nope, it was an American vacuum cleaner salesman.
And listen, this was not just any sales pitch. This guy turned a simple vacuum demonstration into a full-on, magical performance that had the entire family just mesmerized. He was an expert at handling every single skeptical question from Ian's father, turning any objection into a selling point, all with this charming smile.
So after Ian's dad finally explains that they just can't afford it, the salesman delivers this masterful closing line. "Oh, that's great news. I've just sold you a vacuum cleaner." He completely reframed the problem. It wasn't a no, it was just a matter of logistics. Then he pulls out a payment plan. For young Ian, this was a huge lesson. Selling was really about connection and creative problem solving.
And that early lesson definitely stuck with him. So let's fast forward to the 1990s. Ireland is booming. It's the whole Celtic Tiger era. And Ian applies that salesman's creativity to co-found his own tech company, Interact. And get this, it all started on nothing more than a handshake. And the journey was an absolute roller coaster. I mean, just as they were about to secure a $500,000 investment, his partner Carl tragically collapsed and died. Ian somehow had to rebuild, but the company's fall was just as swift as its rise. It got completely wiped out by the dot-com bust and the economic mess after 9/11. You know, this mission statement really captured the spirit of the company. This was no sterile corporate office. Their headquarters, called the Firehouse, had its own recording studio and a bar made from old church pews. The entire culture was built on creativity, a sense of camaraderie, and, you guessed it, having fun. But the end of the business was followed by this deeply personal blow. See, for 6 years after his partner's death, Ian had continued paying his salary to his widow, and in return, she turned around and accused him of intentionally bankrupting the company just for his own personal gain. Just devastating. Well, the judge saw the truth. He pointed out that Ian was paying some of his staff more than himself and hadn't taken any personal loans or benefits. Ian was completely vindicated. But the whole experience just left him emotionally exhausted and financially broke. He had to start all over again. So Ian's next chapter took him into the corporate world, where he landed a job with the tech giant Oracle. But his experience there, well, it was a tale of two very different companies, and it all depended on which side of the Atlantic he was on.
Over in the European division, back in Dublin, he found a really supportive, collaborative environment, and he thrived. But when he finally achieved his dream of transferring to the US headquarters in Silicon Valley, he found this cutthroat, bureaucratic culture where, as he puts it, the dollar was almighty.
And that dream ended just like that. He was fired for advocating for a colleague's fair salary. So now he's 40 years old, his career is in tatters, and his L1 visa is now void. He had exactly 7 days to leave the United States.
You know, sometimes the biggest changes in your life come from the most unexpected places. In Ian's case, with his life at a total crossroads, salvation came in the form of a Craigslist ad for a roommate. He met Amy, a healthcare worker from Texas, and in this whirlwind romance, they went from being roommates to getting married in just 10 weeks. 10 weeks! A marriage that also conveniently allowed him to stay in the country. And with his life completely reset, they made a decision that would define their future. They decided to foster a dog. So Harry was only supposed to be a temporary guest in their little San Francisco apartment, but on the second night, they woke up and found him burrowed right under the covers between them with his head on the pillow. He was home. Harry became what's known in the rescue world as a foster fail, and that was the start of a whole new passion. And what started with that one dog, it just completely snowballed. To date, Ian and Amy have fostered and rescued over 220 dogs.
It turned into a full-scale rescue mission run right out of their home, and they were taking in the dogs at other shelters had often given up on.
So they eventually moved to the countryside in Grass Valley, California, to start a proper sanctuary. But it was a life-threatening crisis that would really solidify Ian's new purpose.
While he was breaking up a dogfight, a 120-pound Mastiff that he'd rescued as a puppy turned on him. The attack was absolutely catastrophic. It severed muscles, nerves, tendons, everything in his left arm. He needed hours of surgery and was facing months of recovery.
And during his recovery, he had a lot of time to reflect. He realized that while his corporate career gave him financial income, this work provided something far more valuable. He calls it spiritual income. You know, those non-financial rewards that make you feel truly happy and fulfilled.
Looking back, he sought his time in Silicon Valley like this. The financial income was way up there, sure, but his spiritual income was at rock bottom. He was chasing numbers on a balance sheet, but his life felt kind of empty, without a real purpose.
And now, well, the roles are completely reversed. As he says himself, he's flat broke, especially after all the medical bills from the attack. But his spiritual income, it has never been higher.
And this is where the whole journey just comes full circle. That confidence, that persuasion, that ability to connect with people that he first saw in that Kirby salesman, those are now his most valuable tools. But he's not using them to sell software anymore. He's using them to convince someone to give a deserving dog a second chance at life.
It's a really powerful story of transformation, and it leaves us with a question to think about in our own lives. Beyond the paycheck, beyond the job title, in the balance sheet of your own life, what's your spiritual income?